I used to think that investing was hard, boring, or complicated, but I found the perfect stock investing course that showed me how to invest as a complete newbie. Now I can build wealth in the stock market and do all the things that I enjoy at the same time. Check out the Lazy Investor Stock course and get started on your wealth building journey today.
So what's going on, everybody? It's David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And so what we're going to talk about today is this analyst is paid to lie to you, right? And so this is going to be a really good video for you to try to understand the difference between buy side and sell side and what it means, right? When you're listening to a buy side analyst or a sell side analyst. So what I have on the particular screen is a guy named Dan Ives. And you may not be familiar with him. He comes on a lot of finance broadcasts and he kind of talks about how he looks at stocks, what his analysis of the stock is, what his perspective of the stock is, things of that nature. And it's really designed to create a lot of, I would say, entertainment for like retail investors because they have to fill content. So all of these big platforms that talk about finance, these media platforms, they need people to come in and talk about something because they have to make content. So they need content hours filled. But what I want you to leave here after this video, what I want you to leave is I want you to leave with the ability to understand the difference between buy side analyst and sell side analyst. When you're looking at Dan Ives is sell side. So the key word to sell side is sell. And this is why I want you to understand when people are telling you that you can't talk about the markets if you don't have this certification, you don't have this license, yada, yada, yada. Dan Ives holds all of that. If he's not successful selling, none of that matters. His number one job is to sell. So he represents the particular business that he works for. He's going to be judged and he's going to be evaluated by the sales that take place underneath him, right? That's what he's going to be. He's not going to be evaluated by what test he passed. He's not going to be evaluated by what license he has. He's not going to be evaluated by what certification he has. He's going to be evaluated by his ability to sell. And then if he's responsible for a team of people, how much they sold, right? And I want you to really understand that because I think, again, we have this misconception of how this space really works. So when we're looking at the markets, you have a market for securities. Then you have another market to sell those securities. So you have two different markets, right? You got to kind of wrap your head around that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an example of what Dan Ives does and kind of how media uses him. But you always want to understand the key thing to a sell side analyst is the concept of they have to sell. And if they're not selling, they really don't have a role in whoever they're working for because their job is to sell. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that. And then we're going to look at this video really quickly.
So much. Does someone else pay the price?
I don't think so. I mean, I believe this could be $1 trillion market cap, over the next 2-3 years. I mean, you've talked for years. You can't just look at these companies on evaluation over the next year. You have to look through and what this company is doing. And I believe this is a generational type of company that Carp and Palantir built. I think, look, last night, that was a jaw dropper. And it showed fundamentally, I'd say outside of NVIDIA, in terms of some of those earnings, there's no other print and guide that I can remember intact the last few years that matches Palantir.
Yeah, I mean, it's Alex Karp, the mover here. It was up over 25% at one point, right now 22%. We have a whole panel on it. So I'm going to leave that for a moment and get to Apple, where you have a 325 target, you have an outperform. You said the iPhone cycle, some people think it's not so great, but you're saying it's actually better than it seems, and that it takes time for Apple AI. It's not an overnight thing like maybe NVIDIA was, or even DeepSeek came in.
Okay, yeah, we got to keep going through all of that. So his job is to get on these shows and to give a very, very optimistic analysis of the book of the company that he works for, and then also the space. And that's his job, right? Now you've got to ask yourself, how come he keeps getting invited to all these different shows? Who knows? He may know the program manager, who knows what's behind that. However, his job was to come on these particular shows and to give a very optimistic analysis of his company's book. Because why? At the end of the day, they need to sell the book, right? Their goal is not just to give you some academic perspective on a ticker. He's not trying to get YouTube views. He's trying to sell his book, right? And so you got to always understand that. So let's talk about the difference between sell side and buy side. Sell side analysts, they rep a large investment bank. They want to sell to you. So let's say hypothetically that me and another person start a hedge fund, we start a mutual fund, we start a pension fund, right? We now have to accumulate securities in that particular fund, okay? Normally we're going to go to an investment bank is because they have the ability to handle the amount of actions. Let's say me and somebody else, we raise $100 million. Okay, so we raise $100 million. We now have the ability to go out into the markets and allocate an outlay or put that capital out into the market. Okay, we now are going to go to an investment bank because they can handle the action that we currently have. The sell side analyst wants to sell to mutual funds, pension funds, and hedge funds. That's their job because they have their book. So what they've done is they've bought a large amount of securities and then they're now looking to sell that to somebody else. Okay. We have the buy side analyst. They normally rep a mutual fund, they rep a hedge fund, they rep a pension fund. They want to buy from a large bank. And so what they're doing is they're looking to establish relationships with really, really large banks and buy from them. So a good example of how these relationships work is if you ever watch this movie called, watch this TV show called Industry. The guy on the left, he essentially plays the same role that Dan Ives plays. He's a sales guy. His job is to sell. And so what he wants to do is find large, high net worth clients and sell his company securities to those large, high net worth clients. If you're looking to spend $100,000 on stocks, they don't have anything for you because it doesn't make sense for them to get all their actual wheels moving for $100,000. They're looking for people that want to spend millions and millions of dollars with them because they're looking to get off their book. So they're holding things they want to get off it. Also, they're going to do IPOs. So when they do the IPO, now we have to go sell them. So I wish I could take this particular show and cut all the sex out of it so you could just see the finance part, but that's not possible unless I steal their content and re-edit it. It's a very, very good show, but it kind of goes over the top with a lot of sexual content. Season 3 was not as bad, but it really gets you to understand how these relationships work from investment banks, startups, individual investors, a lot of them that are also independently wealthy, funds, firms, things of that nature, and how they're all in the same marketplace and how they all do business with each other to keep the market going. You as a retail investor, you really don't have a place in their world because when Dan Ives is giving out his price targets, it has very little to do with the individual investor, right? So you can listen to it, but he's not speaking to the individual investor. He's speaking to the large funds because he wants them to do business with his company. Okay, let's keep going. So what I want to show you is Dan Ives works for Wedbush Securities. He's their managing director. Okay, so he's over global head of technology research. They bring him on a lot of times to talk about tech stocks. And his job is to make sure that the part of Wedbush that does the tech space, that they're driving a lot of sales. And Wedbush is very much, I would say, positioned in the tech space. One of their biggest holdings is going to be Apple, right? So they're really big holders of Apple stock. Okay, so we know that just using Gemini, I believe, they hold Vanguard, these particular ETFs, individual stocks. Apple's one of their biggest holdings, and they hold Costco, then they hold Microsoft. So they're not holding anything really elaborate. They're not holding a lot of exotic stocks. They're not like Cathie Wood. They're not in the genome space. They're not doing anything kind of like way out there. They're holding a lot of blue chip companies, and their job now was to sell those back to larger institutions that are looking for action in those particular areas. You can use this website. You can look up what they're holding. So this is Fintel. If you can pay, you can see what they pay for it. But if you see their biggest holding is going to be VU, which I encourage a lot of people to buy if they don't want to do the research. Then you got Apple. Then you got an ETF. Then you got Costco. Then you got Microsoft. Then you got Amazon. You got to go all the way down here to see how much they're holding a Tesla, right? But they do have a lot of shares of Tesla. So their job, Dan Ives' job, is to get rid of those shares of Tesla, right? Wedbush is not trying to be a holder of securities. They're trying to sell them. So he's in the sales business. So if we buy a lot of Tesla at a certain price, he has to now put out a very, very optimistic price target, because what do we want? We want other people to come in behind us and buy it from us and believe that it has room to grow. So you got to understand that. It's rarely his job to give a less optimistic view of anything because he wants to sell it to somebody else. Okay? So that's what I want you to understand. When you're dealing with an analyst, or you're looking at research, is it sell side or buy side? Many people may not know the difference. So they will, as a retail investor, they will buy a stock based on what a sell side person has told them, and don't realize that the sell side person is not talking to you. They're really talking to buy side. And the sell side guys wants funds. They want pension funds. They want mutual funds. They want hedge funds to do business with them. So they're going to give a very optimistic projection on the stock, because if we're selling it to you at this price, we want you to believe that over the next 12 to 24 months it's going to keep going up, right? So you want to always understand when you're looking at research, is it sell side or is it buy side? Are you looking from an investment bank, or are you looking at an individualized fund that is giving out their analysis? And then what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring people to buy into their particular fund, right? So if we're sell side, what they provide is price and execution. That's the reason why people do business with them. If I have a fund and I'm looking to buy 20K shares from Apple, that's going to be about a $42 million play. I don't want to do that on a retail brokerage account because my execution is going to be terrible, right? I want to go to a large institution that essentially they're already holding those securities. They can just sell them to me. So when you're looking at Wedbush already has inventory already there, right? So they can sell them to me at a different price than what I would get going in as a retail investor. And so that's what you want to understand. So Dan Ives is not looking to do business with me because I don't have enough money for him. He's looking to do businesses with larger firms that can handle the kind of action that his company provides, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to listen to what he says. So he'll get on TV, say anything, because he just wants to keep getting back on television. And one thing I learned from the little bit of time I spent in the media is if when people ask you to come on and you say no, they stop asking you because they just need content. So he's going to just get on television. He's just going to say whatever to get on television again. So because, we want to create a headline. So he says Palantir to $1 trillion market cap. That's a great headline. It allows us to get people to watch it. So Schwab, their YouTube channels, their numbers go up and we keep the ball rolling. But if his company owns Palantir, and I haven't looked at that to find out if they do based on their last 13F, right? He's looking to sell that. Do I see that here? He's looking to sell that to funds or hedge funds. He's not looking to sell that to retail people because the kind of action that they're looking to do based on how much they're holding, a retail person looking to even buy $100,000, that's not enough action for them in most circumstances, right? Unless you have a relationship with the company. So that's all I want to talk about. So I want to really encourage you when you're listening to people give out their price target. And this is why I encourage people to become your own analyst. You have to understand what their motivation is. Because if their motivation is as a sell side person, they're definitely not talking to you as a retail. And if they're coming from the buy side, where it's like Kathy Wood is coming from the buy side, are they looking to just bring more retail people in to invest in their fund by giving you a very, very optimistic perspective of the stock? And so that's one of the things that we're very passionate about here is teaching you how to be your own analyst. And if you don't, you just go by the VOO. Because if you look at this investment bank, their biggest holding is still the VOO. So if you're a hedge fund and you're looking to buy the VOO, they can do business with you because that's still their biggest holding. Their biggest holding is not even in an individual stock. So that's all we're going to talk about. We're not going to be here long. It didn't really take a lot to get into it. But again, understand the difference between sell side and buy side. When you're listening to an analyst, ask yourself what side do they fall on? Do they fall on sell or buy? And then you'll kind of get a better understanding of the motivation behind what they're doing. So we got any questions or comments before we leave?